Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. On behalf of the rural city of Wangaratta, it's great to be out here at the rally. What a great facility you have, and in being here. And thanks to everybody for turning up, and thank you to everybody out there in the kitchen who are preparing something for later on tonight. Appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, clause 91.4 of the Governance and Meeting Conduct of Local Law provides the following: that this meeting is being recorded to improve access to the meeting for our community. The recording will be retained by Council in accordance with Council's legal obligation, and as a visitor in the public gallery, your presence may be recorded. I'd like to stand for our acknowledgement of traditional owners and the prayer, please. I wish to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which we are meeting and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and pay our respects to any First Nation people that may be with us and in this meeting tonight. Thank you. Almighty God, we humbly ask Thee to bless and guide this council in its deliberations so that we may truly preserve the welfare of the people for whom we serve. Amen. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, our agenda is not greatly long tonight, but we will we'll get through it at a reasonable time. There is public question time at the end. If there's any points on the agenda as we go through, I will ask, are there any comments or any questions from the gallery on each item? If you have a question, you may stand, come to the microphone, state your name and ask the question. At the end of the meeting, we will also state the same thing. If you have any general questions at the end on anything to do with council, we will try our best and endeavour to answer it here tonight. Otherwise, we'll take it under advisement and give you a written response and a verbal response from there. So I'd like to start off by, we've done our opening prayer. We're all present here and accounted for. I'd like to move to item number 5, which is acceptance of apologies and granting of leave of absence. And I'd like to hand over to Councillor Irene Grant, please, Irene.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just flagging that I will be an apology at the next formal meeting, May 24. I'll be taking some annual leave and I won't be in attendance, so I'd like you to accept my apology for that particular day.
Ash, would you move that? And Dave, to second that recommendation, that move. Can I please have all councillors' agreements there? Yes, thank you, Councillor Grant. We'll now move on to item number 7 in the order of business, which is the confirmation of the minutes. And I'll look to Councillor Benton first, please.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll move the recommendation with some alterations to the minutes, specifically relating to a question that will be answered later on by Preston. To take that, but also under items 16.3 in the last meeting, there's some surnames that I believe need clarification. There's one that I know is incorrect. And in 16.4, and I know this is probably remedied at the moment, but the word recommendation will be deleted where it's got, and the word motion put in, or the motion is put at that meeting. There's a recommendation referring to the recommendation of officers. If those amendments could be made, I'll move.
Sorry, Harvey, was that recommendation at 14.2 on the golf club development, or because it was an alternate recommendation?
I just thought I was
Councillor Grant?
At 14.2, I got 16.4.
Sorry, a motion. Okay.
You're right?
Yep. Let's note that. Can I have a seconder, please? Got a mover and seconder, Councillor Harry. Sorry, did you have an also an addition to that? Yes, please. So we'll include this as well.
Indeed. Thank you, Mayor. Just to add to Councillor Benton's amendment, I'd like to draw your attention to page 54. I believe it's the third paragraph of the minutes. A question by Susan Ryan. Could the word solidity just be changed to salinity? There are 2 instances of the word solidity to be changed.
Right.
Thank you.
that's a double recommendation by Councillor Herry and Councillor Benson. Is that okay? Can we have a seconder? Well, I'll put that as you as the seconder as well. Okay? Do you think that's correct? It'll give you past the post, right? All councillors in favour? And that recommendation is carried. We'll move on. Thank you. So we'll continue down to corporate services, and I'll look to Councillor Fuller for a change in the service. Thank you, Councillor. Oh, sorry, just one before we do go there. Sorry, Dave. Does any councillor have any conflicts of interest relating to tonight's meeting, any of the agenda items? Good. Thank you, Dave. Down to 14 corporate services.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to move a motion to switch items 14.3 to the beginning and to commence with the Q3 forecast. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, can I have a seconder, please, to Councillor Fitzpatrick? Are all councillors in favour to? And that recommendation is carried. So I'll now look to Sarah for 14.3. We'll change to 14.1, which is the 2021-22 Q3 forecast, please.
Thank you, Mayor Rees. So every quarter we present financial statements to Council to be adopted. So this is the statements for Q3. This reports an accounting surplus which has increased by 2.28 million to 10 million, and the projected underlying deficit has decreased by 3.27 million to 1.52 million. This is largely due to the receipt of grant funding for the federal financial assistance grants, which they normally pay 50% in advance. This year, the remaining 50% next year. This year, they've paid 75% in advance, and that figure is in the millions. So it's a timing of the receipt of that grant funding between this year and next year. The report also includes a decrease in the capital works budget by 6.595 million to 24.32 million, with 6.647 million of works to be carried over into the draft 22-23 budget, which is why it made sense to do this report first. The primary reasons for these carryovers is partly the immediate impact of COVID at the start of the year and also weather, but also the ongoing impacts of COVID to supply chain and availability of materials and contractors to do the work. So this is an anticipation of the timing and phasing of that work. Council also has a number of large tenders currently out in the market, so we'll get even further clarity on completion of some of the remaining major pieces of capital works in the next month or so. And with that, the recommendation is that Council endorses the Q3 forecast review, including an increase to the projected accounting surplus of 2.28 million, reduction to the projected capital works programme of 6.595 million, with 6.647 million of those works identified to be carried forward to the draft 22-23 budget. I just noted a typo in the recommendation there, that should say 6.647 million, not dollars. The addition of $70,000 and $100,000 over 2 years of additional capital project funding for building renewals at the Children's Services Facility. So that's some new capital works funding. And lastly, to note the environmental upgrade agreement quarterly statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Are there any questions from the gallery on this Q3 forecast that basically monitors the performance, council performance against the budget? Okay, I'll look for a mover. Please, Councillor Herry, and a seconder, Councillor Fitzpatrick. Councillor Herry, did you need to talk on this? No? Councillor Fitzpatrick? No other councillor? I'll put the recommendation forward. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. We'll now move back to 14.2, which is the draft budget. Please, Sarah.
So this item is to put the 2022-23 draft budget on public display to be open to public submissions prior to a final proposed draft budget coming for adoption at the June Council meeting. In terms of highlights for next year's draft budget, we're projecting an accounting surplus of $18.15 million, an adjusted underlying operating deficit of $883,000, a capital works programme of 37.14 million, which would be 30.5 million of new capital works, and then that 6.65 million of works carried over just spoken about. It includes a rate rise of 1.75%, which is in line with the Fair Go rate system cap for next year. No new borrowings, and fees and charges in general increasing at the standard 2%. There are some areas where we're intentionally not increasing or proposing intentionally not to increase fees and charges to encourage return and utilisation of things like the Performing Arts Centre. A couple of other areas where there may be a greater increase because fees and charges either haven't been increased for a number of years or off the back of benchmarking as how we compare to other councils and competitors. The proposed capital works budget of 37.14 million includes, in terms of the 30.5 million of new funding, so there's 9.59 million for the WISAC extension, which is 2.49 million over 2 years, of which 5.5 million is grant funding. There's $2.8 million for the delivery of the King Valley Prosecco Road Master Plan, which is also $4 million over 2 years, and that's fully grant funded. $1.5 million for flood mitigation structures, which is $5.4 million also over 2 years, and $3.5 million of state and federal funding, and $1.83 million of gravel resheeting. And there's a full list of capital works projects attached to the report for anyone who's interested. In terms of operating projects, we have the marketing and the marketing and branding strategy, the implementation of visitor services strategy, and a review of the economic development and tourism strategy. We have funding for the environmental sustainability strategy implementation, ongoing funding for the Grit and Resilience programme for mental health awareness and suicide prevention in the municipality. And of course, operating funding for the ongoing provision of essential services that Council provides on a daily basis. In terms of the community engagement process, so subject to councillors adopting the recommendation, the document would be placed on public exhibition from Friday for a period of 28 days. So we invite submissions from the community on the draft budget. That deadline is by 5 p.m. on Friday, the 27th of May. For anyone who wishes their submission to be heard, please specify that, and we will then arrange a committee of council for any submissions to be heard, and then update the budget to come to the 28th of June council meeting to be adopted. I'll just read through the recommendations, so bear with me a minute or two longer for the formality. So the recommendation is that Council endorses the 2022-23 draft budget attached to this report, authorises the CEO to give public notice of the preparation of the draft budget in the Chronicle on Friday, inviting the public to make written submissions on the budget, to make available for public inspection the draft budget at Wangaratta Government Centre and to publish it on Council's website, and to receive written submissions up to 5 p.m. on Friday the 27th of May. The recommendation is also that Council then forms a committee of councillors to meet at a date to be confirmed to hear any person wishing to have their submission heard or to speak in support of their submission on the budget, and then that Council considers all submissions when deliberating the adoption of the 2022-23 draft budget, with or without amendment, at the scheduled Council meeting on the 28th of June. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Are there any questions from the gallery on the draft budget? Thank you. Can I please have a mover? Councillor Fuller, and a seconder, Councillor Grant. Councillor Fuller, did you need to talk? Councillor Grant, would you like to talk? Sorry. Any other councillors? Councillor Fussell, would you like to talk? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. One thing that Sarah didn't go on to say here was there's $350,000 in the draft budget for the redevelopment of the Moyu Hall, which I know that our three guests here will be very happy to hear that in the budget. Thank you.
Councillor Harry.
Thank you, Marius. The budget has come around again. It's a very substantial piece of work every year. I just want to, I guess, acknowledge the team for bringing it together, particularly with some movement in the finance team and some illness we've had recently. So commend that team for doing such a good job. I'd just like to highlight, I guess, another project, specific project in the budget, and that's the solar project on the government centre next year, which is proposed at the moment. It's a project which has an incredibly quick turnaround in terms of payback. We have a number of facilities which don't as yet have solar cells on the rooftops, and this project has an approximate payback of around 4 years. So it's making money from day one, and then after 4 years we are well and truly ahead. I personally would love to see us capitalise on bringing forward some of these projects, more of these projects, so that at the end of the day we have a greater amount of money in council's coffers and a greater amount of money not being spent as outward expenditure on bills that we can keep right here in the community and improve community assets and infrastructure. Obviously, it's, as with any budget, it's a balance of priorities, and for that sort of discussion, it requires, community support to perhaps delay certain projects and support a readjustment of priorities in order to see a better overall long-term outcome. But I just encourage that discussion, encourage submissions from community of all sorts, and look forward to hearing them when they come back. Thank you.
Councillor Benton, nothing from you. Councillor Grant, please.
Yes, I've actually decided that I will make a comment.
No problems.
As is the case with a complex document such as our budget, the devil will be in the detail, and that's why the budget is a draft and it needs to go out to the community for comment. However, it should be noted that there will be no new borrowings, and Council will spend over $37 million on capital works from a total income of just over $89 million, which is really quite significant. And as Councillor Herry mentioned, there are many competing interests in terms of the way we make our decisions around what we need to do and what we can afford to do, and what in fact is our core business as Council. The last 2 years have put a real strain on resources and resourcing, making it more difficult to find any flexibility in the budget. And that's certainly been the case, and you can see that in the numbers that we've got there. Shortages in supply, staffing, events globally beyond our control have all added to the pressures being faced by Council and the finance team, and they have done a fantastic job making the budget balance as well as it has. I'm pleased to note that while there is money for new initiatives, there is also money for the projects, our core projects, which we are obliged to commit to, such as resheeting and footpaths. Fairly dull and boring, but they're the things that hold us to account in terms of what we do as a council. So the budget, I think, in its draft form, is prudent as well as showing foresight. Not an easy task with so many competing demands, and I think that's the thing that we need to remember, because there is just so much that we need to do in terms of how we spend our money, and I think this is an opportunity for the community to come back and tell us what is really important to them, and I think to take a big picture view of how that budget was framed.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. I'd just like to mention when doing a budget for the next 12 months, we have to be mindful of what the future is going to be in 10 years. So we have a long-term financial plan. So we obviously need to make sure there's indicators in our budget to make sure that we're in line with our 10-year financial plan. We find out in 10 years we've got no money to pay for what we're doing today. And certainly that aligns extremely well. So it's a great budget, so well done. So before we go any further, I'll put back to Dave as the mover. Do you have anything to say, Dave, as the mover to finish? No. Okay, I'll now put the recommendation of the vote. All those in favour of accepting the draft budget? And the recommendation is carried. Sarah, we'll go on to 14.2 now, which is delegations, please.
This will be a bit more brief. So the Local Government Act allows for council and the CEO to delegate certain functions to council staff to enable the smooth and efficient running of council. So periodically, those are captured in what we call delegations, and periodically we update those delegations. We subscribe to and receive regular updates from a law firm on legislative and regulatory changes that we need to build into delegations. So this is essentially an administrative process that ensures that council staff have the correct powers allocated to them. So this recommendation is that council endorses the delegation functions and/or powers described, in this case in the instrument of delegation to members of council staff as attached. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Any questions from the gallery? Can I please have a mover? Councillor Buswell. A seconder, please. Councillor Grant. Councillor Buswell, did you need to talk on recommendation? Councillor Grant. Any other councillor? No. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. Thank you, Director Brindley. I'll now move to items number 15, which is infrastructure services. Marcus Goonan, 15.1.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. 15.1, this item is being withdrawn, as we have noticed that although the report is correct, one of the attachments has actually accidentally been left off the agenda. So we'll be bringing this back to a future council meeting with the correct attachments.
Seeing that back 15.1, most probably in next month's meeting in May. Thank you, Director Goonan. 15.2 is our draft asset plan. Please.
Thank you. This report is presented to Council to seek endorsement to place on draft out for public consultation the draft asset management plan 2022 to 32 for a period of 28 days commencing the 27th of April. Council must maintain an asset plan for 10 years with a strategic and financial outlook within the integrated strategic reporting and planning framework in accordance with the Local Government Act 2020. The requirements for an asset management plan in the Act recognise that asset management principles are an integral part of local government businesses, inclusive in that integrated strategic reporting and planning framework acknowledges decisions around assets are not just made for the sake of the asset alone, they're made in the pursuit of the delivery of Council's community vision and Council plan. The report presented to Rural City Wangaratta asset management plan to be delivered under the Act. The recommendation is that Council endorses the draft asset management plan for exhibition for 28 days, reviews and considers adopting draft asset management plan at a further ordinary Council meeting, taking into consideration all submissions made. If no submissions requesting changes are received, adopts the plan without further resolution.
Thank you, Director Goonan. Any questions from the gallery? I have a question. Director Goonan, is this a new asset management plan that just came out by state government legislation around February this year? Is that correct?
This plan is a plan that was required under the new Local Government Act 2020. It is required to be adopted by the end of this financial year.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Are there... can I please have a mover? Councillor Benton and Councillor Grant. Second, Councillor Benton, you need to talk on the asset management plan.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I did actually read this document in the last couple of days, and it's some 82 pages to actually wade through, and it's a rather disappointing though. We've got to be forced to have some of these plans. It's about the fourth one under the Local Government Act that I know of that we've had to have, whether we want it or not. And we were driven by Spring Street, and some of it, I must admit, and is quite very high level in this plan to be able to understand. And to be quite frank, I don't think the community will really understand some of it unless they know the workings of council. But we've got to have it, and I think the officers have done a wonderful job to try and accommodate it. But it's a very convoluted and complex document.
Are you trying to indicate, Councillor Benton, that we spend so much time on these things rather than our core values of roads, roads and rubbish?
I'm just putting on the table, where's democracy lie?
Very good. Thank you. Any other councillor like to talk on this? Councillor Grant, please.
And while I agree with Councillor Benton, I also recognise the need for an asset management plan and how important that is. It gives council, well, hopefully a big picture view of how we manage our assets and what we need to do. It is onerous, and I think some of the things that are being imposed on local government are more onerous than they are beneficial. But I think in terms of us understanding how we move forward in that strategic framework with the assets that we have, I think is a very important document.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Any other councillors like to talk? Councillor Edrick, please.
Thank you, Mayor Rees. Just briefly, I guess, to Councillor Benton's points, it is important that this document is accessible to community members and is relatively easy to read and not full of technical jargon. So please, by all means, in your submissions, point out any ways in which we could make more sense to you.
Thank you, Councillor Harry. Councillor Benton, as the mover, did you want to finish, or are you okay? You're okay. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? Accepting it for a draft. Thank you. The motion is carried. Thank you, Director Goonan. I'll move on to 16, Development Services, 16.1, the sale of land at 75 Carball, Warrowley Road, Warrowley South. Director Swart, please.
Thank you. In December last year, Council resolved to give public notice of its intention to sell the land at 75 Carball, Warrowley Road, Warrowley South, being the site of the former Warrowley South Community and Scout Hall. This notice process has now been completed, and this report is presented to Council to finalise Council's statutory process to sell that land. 2 expressions of interest were received from surrounding landowners to purchase the land, the recommendation from officers tonight is to proceed to sell the land to one of those interested parties and to commence a process to rezone that land from public use zone to farming zone.
Thank you, Director. Are there any questions from the gallery? Yes.
Is it to be farming land?
Yes.
Because one of the tenders does not own a farm.
No,
They only own a building block.
Yes, correct. That will be a farming zone. It will be attached.
They can't
whatever.
move anything else, machinery or anything else onto it.
Well, depends what's under the farming zone and what they can do under the farming zone. I might get Director Swart. Do you have anything there? Oh, sorry, could we have your name, please?
Pat Webb.
Pat Webb. I know it's been. Okay.
I live opposite the block, and I would like to know what's going on, that it can't be used for anything else but farming land.
Thank you for that question.
There is 2 titles. Why can't it be used as a building block?
Director Swart.
Sorry, I'm just noting down the second question. So just back to your first question, if the land sale does go through and Council makes that decision tonight, the intention is that the land would be then incorporated with the successful interested party's property, and that the land will then go from the public use zone to the farming zone. Under the farming zone, a number of different uses are allowed, and that includes mostly things that's related to farming, but also a range of other things, building sheds and so on that people use for farming purposes. All of those types of things are allowed on land in the farming zone. Some of that would require planning permits, some of it would not require planning permits. So this parcel of land would fall under the farming zone and would be managed under the rules of that farming zone.
So they could not move machinery and rubbish and goodness knows what onto the block without a permit.
It's very hard to give a definite answer to that. It depends on exactly why they are doing that and how that's being done. As an example, if it's farming machinery, that's part of a normal farming operation and that wouldn't require a planning permit under the farming zone.
But it's not farming machinery. It's used in different contracts.
If it's not farming machinery and it's being used for another purpose, that is certainly something that could trigger a planning permit or might even be prohibited. So It really depends on the detail of what exactly the person is intending to do on that block.
And how do we, as neighbours, know what they're going to do, or do we have any say in it? Or are we notified if they're applying for a permit?
If a planning permit is required under the farming zone and somebody applies for a planning permit, a council will give notice of that planning permit. That means that neighbours will get letters to let them know that there's an application of council, and you will have an opportunity to look at that application and make a submission if you want to. So that's the normal planning permit process. I have to stress though that in some instances planning permits might not be triggered, so that should be noted.
Thank you, Pat. Yes, sir. Just stand up and just state your name. Just for the record, that's why we have to have that.
Jim McNamara, just a general question with this sale of this property. Will it just run that it'll be sold to the highest tender, or does the council take other considerations or other influences into consideration? So is it just the highest? Is it the highest price, or is there other stuff that's...
As part of the expression of interest process, we did ask the interested parties, how they intend to use the land, or, whether they have any vision as to how the land will be incorporated into their properties. And that did play a role. But, another aspect is, of course, how much the offer is. In this case, the details of the offers and those that put in offers would be confidential. But, those are the types of things that we would consider.
Thank you, Jim. Yes, ma'am. Could you please stand up? Sorry. Just one moment.
If I could just ask people for questions to come up to the microphone and use it, only because we are live streaming it, and it would be very difficult for people to hear if we don't have the microphone feeding into it. Sorry.
And you're the lucky first.
Just speak very directly to the
And maybe just grab it and move it down. Sorry about that. I should have indicated to come forward and do that.
Hi, I'm Elise Pepperbridge. I live on Morale South, and I wasn't even aware that this was an expression of interest, which is a bit disappointing. I mean, I don't read the Wangaratta Chronicle, so I didn't see it in there. I'm just wondering why, if this is going to the Ministry for Planning, why, if it's going from public to farming, it can't be a house block? Because surely that's in the interest of the Morale community, considering that we're flood overlay, landlocked.
Yep. I think that's a good question, Stephen.
Thanks for the question. If the sale does go through and the land gets changed to the farming zone, one of the things that could happen in a farming zone is for somebody to apply for a house on that block. Now, that's something that is hard to predict as to what the future might hold, but there could be a house in that block with a planning permit in place. An application has to be made though, so that's possible.
Okay, I have another question then.
But we can't change it to a residential zone because it's not a residential zone, it's a farm zone.
But it's public land at the moment though, so if you have to go to Minister of Planning, won't they take that into consideration? They just say no.
Sorry, I have to clarify the question. Won't they take what into consideration?
Well, it says here that you're going to go to the Minister of Planning to get it converted to farming zone because it's currently public use. So why can't you go to the Minister of Planning for a housing zone?
Generally, when we rezone land, it has to be based on a strategy of some sort. So council would go through a process of compiling a strategic plan for a certain area. Wangaratta is an example where we would identify growth areas. Then that strategic plan would be incorporated into the planning scheme, and only then would the minister consider rezoning of that land. So in this case, the only reason we are looking at rezoning the land is the fact that it's potentially changing hands from a public ownership to private ownership. And if it's going to private ownership, it's not appropriate to keep it in the public use zone anymore. It has to go to another zoning. The obvious zoning in that area is to look at how the land surrounding that area is zoned, and you would go to the farming zone in that case. If we are looking to change that land from public use zone to residential zone, just as an example, or township zone to allow residential development, we'd have to go through the process that I described. We'd have to have a strategy prepared that justifies that sort of rezoning, and that will take many years, and it really depends on the process and the outcome whether that rezoning process is going to be successful. You'd have to argue that doing that for one individual block might be a little bit inefficient.
I don't think it's inefficient, only because you just said that someone who bought that could convert it into a house block, and if they did that and that went through, the amount of money they would profit from the sale of that land, I think could be better used within our community. On projects here, I don't know why we're losing that opportunity.
Yes, please.
What I did say is that under the farming zone, it's possible to apply for dwellings. I didn't say that they would be able to get a permit for a dwelling. It's really hard to get a permit for a house in a farming zone. The farming zone really is there for farming processes, unless somebody can illustrate that a house is there to help them with their farming business. So even though it's possible, it's not a given that outcome would be allowed. It's a difficult process.
Under the farming zone rules, 100 acres is what you need to be able to get a house.
So even though this is its own title, would it just be combined into that?
Yes.
Right.
There's a lot of land in farming zones on 5-acre titles, 20-acre, 50-acre titles. It doesn't mean you get a planning permit to put a house on it. It's not that easy.
Okay.
If you had 100 acres, you've certainly got a good chance.
Yeah. I have one more question.
Yes, please.
There's two titles there from my understanding. One of them is a scout hall and one was the old school.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering, that scout hall land I think was gifted to the scouts. It's not owned by council, so I'm wondering when the funds go through, what happens to that money?
Yeah, does it come back to council to spend it back to the land? Director Swart?
I'm not aware of the history of ownership of these titles. You are correct that there's two titles involved.
Yeah.
Is that something we can look into?
Could I answer one of those questions and not, I can't walk up to the mark, I've got a loud enough voice.
That's right, I'll allow that.
The
No
Wangaratta
problem.
South community did make it over to the Shire when they wanted us to pay rates on it.
Right, and then it became Shire land.
It became Shire land.
Great, thanks Pat for clearing that one up. Thank you.
But
Yes,
I still think,
please.
does it have to go back to farming land? Because as I said, I stipulate one of the tenders does not own any farming land.
Yes, it does have to go back to farming.
Or there should be only one tender considered, because one tender does not own any land at all except the building block the house is on.
Yeah, it's about the zone and not the existing use of the land.
How do you mean?
Well, we're talking about the zoning. You've got to have justification to turn it into residential. There's no justification to have it as a residential zone. Justification for farm zone, because the whole area around here is all farm zone. So that's where the justification is.
Well, as I say, there's only one farmer that has put in a tender, and I know both tenders.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter who's using it for what. I could put a tender in to buy it as well, and I'd be in a farm zone, and I wouldn't be able to build a house on it or do any of that too. And whether I farm it or I don't farm it, I could just have it sit there and just hop out there and just grow some vegetables on it. But yeah, just one moment, Jim. Jack?
Thank you, Mayor Rees. Perhaps for a question maybe for Director Swart, but just coming back to the criteria that inform our selection of the tender, it's not based purely just on the highest price.
No.
There is an element of the intended use, and I believe there is, and how much does that inform our awarding of any given tender. So if, say, for example, they provide a brief with an outline of what they perhaps intend to do, how much sway does that have on the matter?
Could that be considered? Director Swart?
Yes, as I mentioned before, it's something that we ask for as part of the expression of interest process. So people were allowed to tell us, what their intentions were with the land moving forward. And the other aspect that's important, of course, is what the offer is, the financial offer is. We consider both of those things. At the end of the day, we have to balance those things out a little bit. I do also have to add to say that when it comes to people's intentions in terms of how they use land, right in the short term, it definitely makes a difference. But in the longer term, the planning scheme is the tool that will manage how land is used. So if this land is included in the farming zone moving forward, the farming zone is the main tool that will manage how land is used, and it will determine, what people would be able to, use that land for into the future and what they would be able to develop on the land moving forward. So that's a short-term consideration, but the longer-term consideration would be embedded in the planning scheme.
Farm zone. Jim McMurray, please stand up and state your question. Sorry.
Thank you. Just a little bit of history on that property. It was actually gifted to the community by my grandfather. At the time, I think it was to the education department, but it was for the purpose of a school. My question is, the money that's going to be received for that now, which is coming back into the Shire, is that going to be spent back in this community, or is it just going to be put directly into the Shire coffers?
It's a good question. I can't answer it. Any thought in general, Brendan? CEO Brendan.
Thanks for the question, Jim. Without going into too much detail around the value of the sale, because that is confidential, by the time we complete the sale process, including the valuation we have to do on the land as part of the process we're obliged to do, any legal expenses around change of title, and the process that Stephen's already outlined for the rezoning, I imagine there'd be very little, if anything, left to go back into any other projects. Council is not taking a big bag of cash away from this sale, let me assure you of that.
I'm not sure if that answers your question, really. It's just that there's not going to be a lot left over.
I guess the other point that I'd like to make is that if it was able to have a dwelling put on it, well, then that becomes a very valuable little piece of land. As it is at the moment, it's going to just get chewed up by somebody, legal costs, all the other rigmarole, and someone's going to just end up with it added to their enterprise that they've got there now. So it's sort of a little bit disappointing that a block of land like that, which could be used for a dwelling, and I do understand that with the guidelines, it's out of your guys' control, because the planning's dictated by other influences. But it's just the point is it's going to be sort of just chewed up, and I guess your argument is that it's going to be someone's going to be paying rates on it instead of someone having to maintain it. So I just wanted to make that point, that it was actually gifted in the interim. So,
thank you. Great, thanks. Let me just say in response to that question, if someone could have built a house on the parcel of land, we would have done that at council and arranged it to be a residential block to do it, to make more money, to give back to the whole community of the rural city of Wangaratta. I can't see that happening. I only say that, I can't see that happening. The planning permit could come in and things could change, but I can't see that happening. As in, everyone then who's got a 10-acre block or a 20-acre block or a 30-acre block would use this as a case example and said, you approved it here, why can't I have it, and that would destroy the whole farming zone precinct there, that under 100 acres, which really isn't allowed. So, Councillor Fuller, did you have something to say? I'll answer that. Director Swart, did you have anything further on that?
No.
Great. Just come up the front.
Yep.
Just state your name.
Yeah, so I'm Dan Ivan, and I'm a Wangaratta South resident and late on the scene. And didn't know anything about it until Saturday night when I was told it was happening. Once again, live in Wangaratta South, knew nothing about it. until someone said Saturday night that it was happening, and I just think it's, you know, it was given by the McNamara's, which were great community people.
Johnson.
Which was from CC Johnson, and I think it was a great thing. And I just are disappointed that the council didn't talk to the Raleigh South residents prior to it all happening. It was a community thing. Now, I don't know how far it's gone down the track, and obviously, you know, there's been a lot of talk about it. But I just think there's a lot of little kids up there, and whether it needs to be sold, I don't think it costs that much money to keep it sitting there. Whether it was leased out, it's only an insurance thing that you want to get rid of it. I understand that, but at the end of the day, going forward, does the council, you know, when do you keep taking from our community? Like when do you leave something there that maybe, you know, all those little kids that are running around up there might be taken from their communities, because it just keeps happening and happening, and you know, like they keep saying, when are you going to give us something back? Like they've been knocking on those netball courts for 7 years and nothing's happened. So I just think probably take a think about what you do with it tonight, but I'd be nearly sitting on it and maybe going back to the community and saying, you know, do we want to sell it or do we want to do something with it? Because I would think if you drove up the Raleigh South community, barring those few people that live around that school ground, no one else would know it was even for sale. And that's, you know, that's all I've got to say, but,
thanks, Dan.
you know, take your time and have a think about it.
Thanks, Dan. Sorry, Brendan.
Dan, thanks for the question, and it's a really sensible question. Can I just make the point, in case you and others aren't aware, we actually considered selling this block of land going back, I think 6 or 7 years ago.
I was in the fight to stop it there.
2014. Where we got to at that point, due to feedback from the community, was that we want to keep it. We're going to establish a group to do something with the site. We'll make it a local park. We'll get the community involved and get it using. None of that occurred over that period of time, 7 or 8 years ago. So we decided to revisit it, re-advertise the process, and here we are. So it's not like the council hadn't considered leaving it in the community and giving the community an opportunity to do something like that with us. That was done, and that was, for whatever reason, was never taken up.
Yeah, if I could just say, since that last meeting, there's probably 5 or 6 couples now that live up there that have all got kids that would be under 10 years of age, maybe, would they be? You know, everything changes as it does in the council, and maybe all I'm saying is take your time and think about it, maybe ask the community whether they do want to use it again as a scout hall or whatever it may be. Like, you know, CC Johnson was good enough to give it to the community, you know, and I just think it's the wrong thing to do to take something away that was given to the community. I think it's the wrong thing to do to take it away from the community, that's all. Maybe I'm wrong, but, you know, ask the question, that's all I'm saying.
Thanks, Dan. If there's nothing further, can I have a mover of the recommendation? Jack? Councillor Herry to put on the table, and a seconder, Councillor Grant. Councillor Herry, did you want to talk to the recommendation? As the mover? No. Councillor Grant, did you need to talk about it?
Only to say that in my role as an administrator, I was involved in the discussions around what we might do with that block of land, and I know there were a lot of assurances from the community that that was land they wanted to do something with. And time has passed and nothing has been done. So, you know, the decision is, you know, erring towards the fact that, you know, here's a block of land that, you know, someone could use. And Director Swart did talk about the potential of a dwelling could be if it was part of a farming enterprise. So there's still an opportunity for that to be part of the community, and you acknowledge things change and things do change, but also, you know, when there has been consultation, and the consultation is, I think in a way just reached a point where we haven't moved beyond what was talked about in 2014. I think it's possibly time to move forward.
Any other councillor? Councillor Bussell?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I acknowledge the interest around this block of land, but any pennies that can be put towards this facility here, and as far as I'm concerned, my main focus is getting 2 new netball courts here, and any dollars that we can raise in council, I think would be better spent here in this precinct rather than anywhere else. So I'm certainly in support of selling the block of land, but I want to make sure that these facilities here are front and centre with your community, and I think there's much better value in consolidating everybody's efforts here in this magnificent precinct around us at the moment. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Councillor Harry, as the mover, did you want to finish?
Thanks, Mary.
Just before we do, everybody else has had their talk. Thank you. Thanks, Councillor.
Thank you, Mary. Yeah, I think Councillor Bussel's points about consolidating resources in one place is wise. We don't want to spread ourselves too thin. Mind you, having said that, the sale of this land, as CEO McGrath pointed out, won't result in a great bucket of money coming our way. It is very much a low upkeep piece of land. It doesn't cost us a lot of money to sit on it by any measure. It is a tidying up, I guess, and finishing of unfinished business that, as Councillor Grant pointed out.
Okay, it's recording again. Okay, all right, thanks. Yeah, okay, thanks. Brilliant, bye.
Good to go? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen. Oh, should we wait? Councillor Fitzpatrick has just stepped out for a bit, but these are public questions in relation to issues that we don't have to vote on, so I don't think it's imperative that she be here for these questions. I'll revert back to our previous meeting, which was held at the Carball Hall last month, and there was a question by Mrs. Dorothy Preston that was asked and answered, and the live streaming and recorded part of it was not included, and therefore not minuted in the minutes of which Councillor Benton raised today. So we're going to raise this question today, tonight's meeting. As discussed, the question I asked at the last council meeting was omitted from the minutes. It was also not included in the video recording. Can you please note to the councillors that the minutes are therefore are correct as of the following and not included in relation to the permit of gold ore processing at 145 Mamunji Road. Is there an engineering design and specifications for the construction of the bunding? Could I look to you, Director Swart, to answer this question?
Thank you. The notice of decision issued in relation to that planning permit application includes conditions from the North East Catchment Management Authority and Goulburn Murray Water, requiring an earth bund to be constructed around the southern perimeter of the works. This bund is shown on the plan submitted with the application, but no detailed engineering plans were submitted with the application. It is typical for the more detailed engineering plans for works associated with the development to be prepared after planning approval is granted. This type of technical detail is generally not required to allow for a decision to be made about a planning permit application, unless there is any doubts about the feasibility of the necessary engineering works. In this case, the proposed bund structure was a basic structure and feasible to construct, and therefore it's appropriate that the detailed engineering plans be required as a condition of the planning permit, rather than being required to be submitted with the application.
Stephen, can I just extend onto that question for clarification? So it was approved at the planning stage there by us. Once those plans are submitted now, do they need to be approved by planning or infrastructure?
Yes, so those plans will be submitted to council for further approval, so that's called secondary consent, and it will go through our infrastructure team to check as part of the drainage process.
And in alliance with North East Catchment Management, who asked for bunding to be Women's Bridge that crosses the Ovens River. Director Swart, could you handle that one too?
Thank you for that question. The area along the area of land along the Ovens Rivers is managed by the Victorian State Government. and the regulation of camping in that area is the responsibility of the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning. Council does not have the authority to restrict access to this land.
Thank you, Director. Question 3. Sorry.
Can I or ask a supplementary question to that question?
Love you to, since we're on that matter. Come up to the front, Jim.
Yeah, thank you. You obviously know who I am now.
Yep.
But as far as I could with regards to the planning rules, and my understanding of it is that providing there's access to their government land or public lands or whatever you want to call it, that camping is permitted, but providing it is within 20 metres of the river, which I think they can do down there but if it can't be within 200 metres of a home or a dwelling. Now I've had a bit of a look on Google Maps and with some measurements, and where the camping area where they camp down there is 150 metres from one dwelling and 180 to another 2. So I believe that whoever manages these areas have the right to put up some sort of a sign there to say that it's not.
The camping's prohibited.
Yeah, it's prohibited. And there was a couple of other things that with regards to toilets, they have to be constructed or has to be disposed of within at least 100 metres away from the waterway and not on private property. And that's just not possible down there because all the private property which runs through there, which is actually my paddock, is only probably somewhere 30-40 metres away from where they camp. So under those implications, well, who do we see to get some sort of a no camping sign put up? Is it with you guys or is it with the departments?
Yeah, the Department of Environment, Land, but we'll certainly take it up with them and talk to them. Stephen, any further advice on that one?
Yes.
Take that up with 12.
So it is the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning. Today I've sent an email to them on the back of this question to try and find out, who within the department actually is a person that you could deal with if you had further questions. I haven't had a response just yet, but I'll continue to follow that up.
Yeah, we'll take your number down at the end of the night, Tim, and make sure we probably got your email and everything, and we'll follow it through.
Yeah, just further to that, I don't know what's required to get listings on Wikicamps, but this property here obviously is on, and if it wasn't, there was no camping there, it could be listed on Wikicamps as a day use area, because in the summertime, it's not unusual to have 15, maybe even 20 cars down there in the summertime of people using it for swimming and barbecues, picnics or whatever as a day use area. And if you've got one caravan or one camping area set up, it restricts
everyone else.
It restricts the area because it's not a big area. It's not a big access area. So I don't know what's required to get things listed on Wikicamps, but if you could get that listed on Wikicamps as a day use area, well, people see that and they say, okay, well, it's not. I had a person ask me the other day, he pulled up the caravan and said, can we camp here? And I said, well, there's no sign saying you can't, but, in my opinion, legally, you can't. So they spent the whole of Easter there with toilet paper, a bit of mess and so forth. And you don't have to go very far and I can show you photographs, but I could show you the real thing too if you wanted to see evidence of what was left behind.
No, good.
And just one quick question, quick comment I suppose, is why can't there be a dump point put here at this facility here? The closest dump points to us at the moment, I believe, are Oxley, and I think Moyu has just got one put in.
I don't think there's one in Oxley, is there?
There's one of the reserve.
The reserve, yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah, Wangaratta's got one too. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Jim. We'll take that under advisement. My second question is, and just bear with us, there's a couple of long questions here, so I'll just read them through extremely quickly. They're in relation to the Glenrowan Heritage
Mr.
Precinct.
Mayor, sorry.
Yes.
Jim, in regards to the dump point, that's the perfect opportunity to put a submission through to the draft budget that we put through earlier for public to comment and submit on. So potentially the committee here could take that on board as a potential submission to put forward to us.
Thanks, Ruth. That's okay. So question number 2 is from a Mr. Anthony Griffiths. That this question was sent within the appropriate time frame as a question to Council for the meeting on the 29th of March 2022 and was acknowledged by Council but wasn't read out. Could Council please explain why it wasn't read out? I'll just explain that first paragraph there. There was a mix-up on questions that we had. Another question from a Joanne Griffiths. We thought it was the same question as Anthony, their brother and sister, and that's the reason why we didn't read it out. So hence we're doing it now. The question is about the proposed tower in the Lions Park, Glenrowan Heritage Precinct. Council's application for a permit for this development to Heritage Victoria, certified to be true and correct, was followed by a statement from Council responding to objection that placing the tower in the park was destructive and insensitive to the heritage values of the place. Council's letter to Heritage Victoria dated the 30th of August 2021 stated, thorough investigation has confirmed no siege events took place in this park. This person is stating that this statement was false, being contradicted by the Glenrowan Master Plan in 2002, that the founding document for the heritage listing of the precinct, and by evidence put before Council in the objection. Council cannot deny that the park was a gathering point for supporters of the Kelly gang and that rockets were launched from the park by the supporters, that this was a place where events at the Glenrowan Inn, including the tragic burning, were monitored by police, friends and relatives of participants. It was used by photographers and artists and civilian supporters and spectators. It was also a gathering point for undertakers at the place where bodies of the deceased were ultimately taken from being retrieved from the jails of the burnt Glenrowan Inn, the coals of the burnt Glenrowan Inn, and initially taken to the Glenrowan station by police and recovered by relatives in the most tragic and upsetting of circumstances, which was reported in the Kilmore Free Press at the time. On the 22nd of February, Council claimed that the Glenrowan Master Plan had been considered in the application and approval of the permit. Why has Council given misleading information and no consideration to the feelings of relatives and friends of the descendants in its decision to put the tower in the park against strong heritage recommendations and disrespecting the strongest commemorative value of the space? How can Council justify cladding the building in burnt black timber as a reference to the historic aesthetics when that is clearly a distressing insult to the descendants? Will Council respect history, heritage and relatives' wishes by ceasing construction and placing this development elsewhere? Director Swart.
Thank you for that question. A permit application process was completed in accordance with the Heritage Act for this project. The process included providing public notice of the application, giving anyone the opportunity to inspect the application and to make a submission to Heritage Victoria. As part of the heritage application process, the impact of the proposal on the heritage place was considered, including the siting of the building. Heritage Victoria considered all relevant matters, including consistency with strategic plans, impacts on the heritage place and public submissions, and determined that it would be appropriate to issue a permit for the development. The viewing structure is currently being constructed in accordance with this permit, and Council will not be ceasing construction and placing the development elsewhere as requested.
Thank you, Director Swart. My question number 4 is from Joanne Griffiths, Reader Ned Kelly Centre. The question is in regard to the Council's answer to questions on the 22nd of February and the 29th of March regarding the alleged views claimed as justification for the design and siting of the proposed Glenrowan Cultural Interpretive Centre Tower in the heritage important open space in Lions Park of Glenrowan. Council's answers have stated that the location for which approval was sought in its heritage impact statement to Heritage Victoria is consistent with the Conservation and Landscape Management Plan 2018 that was adopted by Council in June 2018 and the prior Glenrowan Master Plan of 2002. Notably, his statement is not reassess any of the findings of significance of those comprehensive prior heritage studies. In fact, the CLMP and GMP both rank Lions Park as an important open space foreground of authentic character and seed site, and both strongly recommended against any building within that park that would interfere with the planned enhance of the ground level views between the Gladstone Street and the Glenrowan Inn and Station. These findings form part of the CLMP policies adopted by Council, which has included restoration of the original views by removal of the existing buildings, including the former toilet block, and the removal of the non-Indigenous tree. Why did Council, he's submitted to Heritage Victoria, fail to comply with these strong recommendations and policies, and why was the CLMP not listed as an attachment to his recommendation and not listed to his, despite it being required as part of the application under the heritage regulations? Does Council acknowledge that Council, his HIS, at page 31 purported to include a diagram of the site from the CLMP, page 13, by Mr. Michael Cook, that had the tower location drawn onto it, when the fact that the tower is not the original diagram? Does Council admit that this was misleading? Does Council acknowledge that the various claims made in this HIS that a specific location for an interpretive centre in Lions Park were made in the CLMP, where in fact the CLMP placed very strong conditions placed on any such building that is regarded only as a possibility if the conditions were met by good design, and that those conditions are not met by the current tower? Does Council acknowledge that siting of the tower heavily contradicts the CLMP and GMP recommendations it adopted, and the borough character that considers tower in heritage places generally inappropriate? Is Council aware that the decision signed by the Executive Director of Heritage Victoria on the 2nd of September 2021 appears to have relied on misleading information, and this HIS, and it is aware that the signed decision of the Director has failed to clearly specify whether the application should be improved or rejected? Will Council suspend the heritage damaging construction until these matters are fully investigated and resolved, of which I will answer? The points raised in these questions by Joanne Griffiths, I will state, have previously been raised. I also refer to the response provided to the question from Anthony Griffiths, which we did, in that heritage permit process and constructive of the viewing structure. So what I'm stating, these questions have been asked and they have been answered in a public forum such as this, and also in private. So it's the end of that question. So ladies and gentlemen, I now put to you, is there any other public questions from the gallery here at Werrowley before we finish and have a cup of tea and talk privately from there? Please.
I'm Susie Bull, and I live on the main road here at Rowley, and we are very, very concerned about the speed at which traffic goes through our town. Like right through, we've got right in front of my gate, I've got a 100-kilometre sign. I've brought this up for years and years and years, and I know that Shire has sent letters over years, and lots of other people in the community have brought the same thing up. I would like something done about it as soon as possible. I would like the 100-kilometre sign moved down to the other side of the Ron Nicol Bridge, and perhaps 60 through the town, and because all the way down the other end, down there, Rowley, down there, it's all 80 all the way through to the main road, and yet right in front of our place it's 100. But the cars are going 100 from down here before they even get to the 100 sign. And it's dangerous. You've got kids on bikes going to school, you've got young children around, and I just think something needs to be done about it. And it's an urgent thing to be done.
Thanks, Sue. Good
right?
question. Director Goonan, response for Sue Nicol, please.
Thank you for your question, Sue. You're not probably going to like my answer because it's going to sound like I'm passing the buck a little bit. Unfortunately, speed zoning sits with Regional Roads Victoria and then Vic Roads in Melbourne. So we can certainly advocate, even on our roads that is, we can certainly advocate for that, and I'm more than happy to do some research on that. We can put counters out, etc., and we do that pretty regularly on most of our roads to see what traffic is doing. That will give us both an indication of speed, numbers of vehicles and types of vehicles. From there, then we can continue that conversation. The bit where I was saying I don't want to disappoint you, it's not a quick process, unfortunately. So you are looking, if it needs to go all the way to Vic Roads in Melbourne, you're looking at potentially 12 months. That's how long it takes to go through before it can be approved. Things such as shifting 60 kilometre signs out to where 80 kilometre signs and things like that can be approved locally, but that doesn't sound like what you're talking about in this situation.
You know, just that it's a 100k sign right at my gate.
Yep.
And like, you know, it's in the town area. Like, it's
Yep.
ridiculous.
So I won't be able to move that one straight away. That's one that I'll have to go down to Melbourne for. So what we need to do is assess it. There is a number of criteria that Vic Roads have set for us even putting in an application. We need to make sure it meets that application. And then from there we can move forward. So more than happy to come back to you with a little bit of data in a couple of weeks' time, and then we can continue that conversation.
Thanks, Sue. Good question. Any other questions from the gallery? Please come forward.
Yeah, I'm Laurie Chalmers. I'm a resident on Bowman's Road. In about 2018, I forgot to bring the letter with me, but it was notified that to all the locals that the road was going to be the sides reformed and the road resealed. A month later, some machinery turned up, scraped off a little bit of the side of the road, and that was all that was done. And now the asphalt is actually breaking away, the road is getting narrower, and there's a lot more trucks with dog trailers, gravel trucks and cattle trucks moving through, and especially on the hotel corner, it's broken right away. So yeah, all the trucks have got to go wide around the corner, and it's getting a bit dangerous with cars coming the other way.
Thanks, Laurie.
Just wondering when that may happen.
Good question. We might have to come back to you under advisement unless Marcus knows now.
Yeah, thank you, Laurie. I will have to come back to you. I don't know our exact program for next year. Certainly, it sounds like it requires some sort of reseal. I'm not sure what the works are that you previously spoke of, so I apologise for that. But I can have a look into that. And I'll come back to you and let you know where that might sit on our reseal program. So we spend about $800,000 a year on resealing. That gets us about 50 kilometres of reseal done. So you can imagine it doesn't get us a hell of a lot, but certainly I could have the crews out there to have a look and see what we can do.
Thanks, Laurie.
Really chopped away.
Is there already, we just grab your phone number afterwards so Marcus can get back in touch with you and just arrange a meeting, come out and have a look? That'd be great, thank you. Laurie's. Any other questions from the gallery? Yes. You might have to poke the microphone. Jim was pretty tall and sort of a bit higher for him. That's the go.
I'm not sure if you're aware about it, but at Morale South there's a Y intersection, and it was brought up with council, I think 4 years ago now, about fixing it because it's a hazard. And I think recently Rolly Matheson's been...
Has called me, and I've been talking to Director Goonan about that with Councillor Bustle, and we are intending to get out there shortly and have a look at it with Rolly.
Yeah, he can't come tonight. He's an apology. He's got COVID. So.
No, so no, it is on an agenda. We haven't forgotten about it. So I was only just talking to Marcus Goonan about that a few days ago, saying we have to get out there and have a look. And he said, "You fix it up, I'll be there." And Councillor Bustle will come as well, seeing this as his ward, and we'll get Rolly to come down and explain. And I know he's had a couple of new misses.
Yeah, so I'm the property on that intersection. So if I could be notified too when you come out,
we'll grab your number too. We won't do it online, and we don't want people phoning you. I'm sure Harry knows your number. If you do, great. Any other questions from the gallery? Yes, please.
I'm Christine Chalmers, a resident here of Rowley. All the councillors know about our grants being put in for the last few years for the netball courts?
Yes.
Because sometimes you talk to a councillor and they know nothing about it. So we have 6 teams training here on a Tuesday and Thursday night, which makes it very difficult on one court. And we're afraid that if it goes for too long, we won't be able to play at all and we won't have teams because of the danger. So we want to get it fixed before that happens. We don't want players to go elsewhere because we've got a crappy court. So, and I see we're not in the 22-23 budget, even though we've been putting grants in every year. So it's, what do we have to do to actually get it in the budget? Because it took us 20 years to get new football chain sheds, which were 60 years old and the oldest in the league, and it still took us 20 years of putting grant applications in. So is it because we're right at the end of the rural city of Wangaratta Shire that things just get put on the back burner? I hope not, but we seem to be getting nowhere every time we put grant applications in. And I know the Poor Old Rec Committee are beside themselves with the number of grants they have to write for, you know, major things like that take quite a while to write up, and it just seems they have to keep going over the same thing. So it'd be nice if it was taken into consideration seriously. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine, and I can assure you it is looked at very regularly. Councillor Bussell harasses us all about it, so we all do know about it. It was one of his, I believe, his election promises. Is that correct? Yes. He tried his hardest. Yeah, it certainly is. No, and we all know about it. I can tell you that through him constantly banging on about it. Yeah, I know. We do have a lot of sporting clubs around and other clubs that are constantly wanting money all the time, and we know it is on our important list here.
They've all got their courts. All the courts in the Anderson King League are better than ours. They've all been done.
Yep. Just we may have a bit of an update, Director Goonan.
So I'm not sure whether Councillor Bussell's going to be happy with this because it's potentially outside his term. But the current long-term financial plan for council, which is a 10-year plan, has us reconstructing the courts here in the 25-26 financial year. We have detailed design happening this year. What the detailed design does is it gives us a chance to apply for more and better funding, particularly from Netball Victoria. In my time at council, which is almost 5 years now, we've only reconstructed 3 netball courts in the whole municipality, and that includes no netball courts within Wangaratta. That's Millarwa, North Wang, and now I can't remember the other one. Glenroe, thank you, yes. Yeah, sorry, I'm talking about my time in the last 5 years. So it is not that we're spending a whole bunch of money replacing netball courts within Wangaratta. Everyone is screaming out for new netball courts, and it does take time. Certainly my staff spend a hell of a lot of time supporting a lot of sporting clubs to try to get funding for their facilities, and sometimes we're lucky and we're able to do that, and other times we're not. There is money in the budget. Yes, it's a little while off, but it is certainly in there.
I will say with us doing the detailed design work on those courts, if a grant funding application comes out through the government, Victoria or federal government, if you don't have this detailed design work done, there's no point in applying for a grant. This is how North Wang got done and got the funding forward on North Wang. They had the works ready to go, and bang, we got it through Bridget McKenzie at the National Party there at the time through the federal election to get that done. But we're doing this work this year, so that if something came up at the end of the year or the start of the new year, etc., we can put that funding application in because we've got it for shovel-ready projects.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'll just ask Marcus, what's involved in the detailed design of the netball court?
Yeah, so the detailed design will be obviously coming out and consulting with the committee and the user groups about exactly what they would like to see, numbers of courts, type of material, etc. From then we go away and we actually do soil tests, have a look at what the material is underneath, making sure that we've got something that will stand up. there's drainage, there's some loose guidelines would be the best way to put it around where hard courts should face and how they should face. And I'd note that these don't actually face in the right direction currently. So there is a little bit of work to be done around that, because then we need to have a conversation around, okay, where exactly do the rooms and the roads, etc., and footpaths and things like that need to go around them actually sit. So there is quite a bit of work in that detailed design.
So will that detailed design be done this year?
Done next financial year,
Yeah,
coming
from-
financial year, so that, yeah,
First
so
of July.
subject to the budget being approved in June, we'll get going on it ASAP.
That funding amount is in the budget for us to adopt at the June meeting.
Yeah.
So there's $30,000 in the budget to complete that work. Thank you. Yes, doesn't stop putting in a submission to the budget for this year to get accepted. So Ruth, if you want to put another submission in again to do that, it can be looked at and then where to from there. We can.
Should have a number by now.
If you directly lobby the state member and also the federal member in terms of, you know, the fact that you're wanting to get this funding up, it sort of puts a pressure on them to also provide that money back to council.
Yeah, and it's a funding process. It could be a shared funding process between the state and us, or through the feds and us.
So I'm sorry, I don't know the council, the running of things. So do we have to put a grant in every year? You don't, grants that weren't agreed to last year, they have to be re-put in again the following year. You don't carry them over to the following year?
Can I just clarify, when you talk about a grant, do you mean a budget? Did you make a budget submission on this? Is that what you mean? Yeah. So it's probably better from our perspective if you can resubmit that. Every year we reconsider the budget, so it's better for us if you resubmit it. A whole bunch of other people will be making submissions, and the risk is that that's what our attention is on if we don't get something fresh from you. So if you've got something you can just change the dates on and resubmit, then that's helpful.
Thank you. There was someone else got up to say a question there before, and he said... Oh, okay. Yeah, got that. Jim. No, sorry. You're right. And then you.
Sorry to be in use. This is just I know we've already dealt with the Rowley South thing, but just a general question, I guess, to the council. In the case of public land like Rowley South being sold, is it always that it goes to a tender like it did, or wouldn't it be in the ratepayers' interest for it to be advertised properly so everybody knows about it and to be put to a public auction? So what is the ruling on that? Is it just a council decision, or is there a set process?
There is a set process, Jim, that's set out in legislation that we have to follow. Our normal practice would be that it's advertised, either advertised for sale or advertised that we're running a tender process. I'm pretty sure in the case of this there was a notice put in the Wangaratta Chronicle, and I heard earlier that not everybody reads the Chronicle, but the fact remains that is our locally circulating paper, so that is what we rely on for these sorts of notices. So it would be very, very rare circumstances that we would sell land without it being advertised in some fashion like that.
But isn't the best way for it to be put out in the public is for a sign to go up there saying it's for sale, whether it's a public auction or tender, but at least something go up on the property so that everyone who drives past there knows what's going on.
Yes, not a bad suggestion. Not a bad suggestion at all. So we'll take that up.
Just quickly, is that tender process closed?
Yes.
So you've sold that, not yet, but you'll vote on it, without any of us knowing that.
Yep.
So you didn't put a sign up Like, the difference is that might make 10,000, it might make 50 or 60,000. Like, and here we are putting money back into our community. Like, why would you do it? That's a ridiculous thing to do that anyone in business would know. If you don't tell the public, no one else is going to know. I just can't believe you've done it. Like,
It was advertised.
in the Wangaratta Chronicle. You can buy the Alpine Times. It's not in the Wangaratta Chronicle.
We have a rally newsletter.
That's right. Why would you not tell anyone? I can't believe it. Like, especially, due respect, you're a real estate agent.
I am. And,
I can't believe you've done it. It's just ridiculous. And here we are wanting money for the netball courts.
Sorry, that's right. Please, madam, would you like to get up?
I'm Pauline McPherson, I'm a local resident, and I'm also the principal at the school, and this is only relevant because of the question I have in relation to the drainage works that were surveyed, planned for Church Street and for Lagoon Drive, so that's the corner of the school. And the council have acted on firstly in just doing some minor works last year for the school because of terrible, we get a lake out in front of the school basically. And but in about 2018 or 19, the plans were drawn up for the drainage works, and so money's been spent by council to do the work, to prepare for the work, and then it's never happened. And I notice it's not in the budget again, so it hasn't been in the budget following that work. And I'm just wondering, do I have to put in a submission for it to go ahead, even though council have already funded the planning for it?
The detailed design and drainage design has been done. You're saying, is it?
Yep. And there was a changeover of people, I think that was part of the reasoning behind it, sort of getting shelved, but it's a bit like the netball courts. You put it in, other people come along and they don't know, our needs here, so I don't know, do I have to put in a submission for it to happen?
So I'll just answer the first part of the question while Marcus is searching through the long-term plan to see where it's sitting there. It's quite normal for us to do advanced design work. It's going back a number of years, we would try and design a project, get it funded and build it all within 1 year, and inevitably that would fail. So our new practice is that we try and advance design a whole range of things that we know need to be done so that they are more project ready when they're funded either by us or others. So that's kind of normal practice. It doesn't always follow that we design 1 year and build the next, but we try and have designs ready so that they are buildable when we've got funding. There you go, Marcus, with your search. We might have to take that on notice, Marcus. It's not easily finding.
Found in the conversations I had with council.
We'll come back to you on the timing of the long-term plan on that one.
So the infrastructure plans that were completed as part of the rural placemaking project. So back 4 or 5 years ago now, the rural placemaking project was envisaged and came to life and was supported by council. From there, what we've actually done, because there was so many infrastructure projects within that in each of the smaller towns, we've been out and we've actually done an infrastructure plan for most of the towns. So the first plan that got an infrastructure town, Millarwall has one, Oxley has one now, Rowley has one, Tarrawingi has one, etc. The way that we work with it is that we do the plan. It takes us about a year or so, and then we come back a couple of years' time and we start spending some money on that. The reality of that is, though, when we're talking about money, we're talking $150,000, $200,000, and most of the total of the works in each of those towns is probably up around $900,000 worth of work. So we will get there slowly, but these plans are deliberately put down so that we're not causing problems to someone else, or we're not cutting ourselves out of being able to do something later on. So it's a bit more of a holistic approach as opposed to just doing piecemeal bits within the towns.
This was surveyed, the work
That's
was
right.
actually done.
Yep.
And we've got like it's a school and there's an open drain and, you know, and there's cars and a bus. So
Absolutely.
It's not something for 10 years down the track.
Yeah.
If at all possible.
It's right near the playground for the children as well, and a lot of mozzies and everything are down there. That can't be healthy for those children.
Yep. So, as I said, that's how we're essentially prioritising the works, and we do with what we can. I know that Rowley, and I'm fairly sure at the front of the school, we do some works in that first year.
No, it was just recently.
Sorry, yes, recently in the last,
last
12 months?
Yeah.
18 months? Yeah.
12 months, but that
So,
was a general quick fix.
yeah, absolutely. So, and we'll continue to do those quick fixes. We're not moving away from our maintenance programs, but what these projects are about is that longer term view, and unfortunately it is going to take us a number of years to be able to implement the entire plan.
So I don't have to do anything else. It's on
No,
the list.
it's on the list. Yes. Whether you're principal to see it or not, I'm not 100% sure.
I'm glad you're on the list. We're all on the list.
Sir, please come forward and state your name.
For the record, my name is Colin Walker.
Thanks, Colin.
I'm a little bit too close to that. I'm a Rowley resident and I'm the treasurer of the subcommittee of council that manages this reserve. I think we've had a bit of a snow job from the councillors tonight as far as finance is concerned. I know that since the change rooms here were done, there's been no substantial money spent on this reserve. It's only been money that's been raised by the subcommittee and done by the subcommittee. I'd like to have some idea of what plans the council does have to support us. I know we've had it about the netball courts, but we've also got a very antiquated toilet block that requires substantial money spent on it, way more than what we can do ourselves. I would ask that with the council, we as a subcommittee put up these things. We put up that the netball courts require redoing, but then we're required to do it again and again. So why isn't the council actually doing their job of supporting the subcommittees and continuing to push these things? That's it. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit disappointed with council, to be honest.
Thank you, Colin. Thanks, Colin. We do, and you do have a ward council like Councillor Bustle, who does push a lot of your programs forward, and I'll convert back to More You's been pushing for 10 or 15 or 20 years to have their hall fixed and cleaned up. Finally got the money through in more recent times that it's programmed into this budget upon it being accepted in June. So things do take time. Everybody's got their hand out at the moment for money on everything. Every facility, everything is dated and dilapidated. We've got the same thing at Tarrawinji. I met with the Tarrawinji people out there about their toilet just on Monday. It is constant. You are in our thoughts. You do have a great facility. Thank you for looking after it and doing such a great job. You do a great job and we do appreciate it. And I know Councillor Bustle, as your ward council, will be working harder and harder to make sure we get some things done out here. So,
can I also say that
please,
Councillor Bustle isn't the only councillor that advocates, and we try to be as even-handed as we can. And I mean, we're trying to be all things to all people, and hear your concerns. And I think, we try our best to spend what money we have in the most even-handed way right across the whole of the municipality.
I don't think solar panels on the council building are more important than our netball courts, to be honest.
Well, look, I hear all sorts of things, and we try and make the best decisions with all the information that we have. We try and be as fair as we possibly can. And as the Mayor said, we recognise the hard work that the community put into keeping these facilities looking as good as they do. And we are trying our very best. And I think what we constantly do too is try and find the external money that we can help to boost what we do. And as I said earlier in a around the budget, that, you know, we're spending almost half of what we actually bring in as revenue on infrastructure. But even that's not enough. So it is a difficult task and constant and competing interests. So I think, you know, I understand where you're coming from, but I think, you know, in terms of fairness to council, we try and be as even-handed as we possibly can.
Thank you. This is the last question. Thank you.
Sorry, you don't want to hear from me.
Could you state your name, please?
Sorry, my name's Marion Walker.
Thanks, Marion.
I am also one of the little plebs on the subcommittee here. I'm also a ratepayer. I live in Church Street. I come to this facility probably twice a day, walk my dog. Harry, you know, you hate seeing my face. Because how many times, Harry, have I asked, please can you do something about the walkway around this oval? It is, this oval, this rec reserve, is the only place in Waraili where people can come and safely walk their dogs. We have a number of young people, young mothers, parents with babies, they're out there walking. I tell you what, guys, before you leave here, you should all go and have a walk around that oval, right? Not on the inside either. Today it's dry. Today it's a bit safer. Tomorrow it's going to rain. It's going to rain for the next 2 weeks. Where the hell do we walk? Because the rain's not going to stop us walking, but because we still need to walk. But where is it going to be safe? You talk about money all the time. Do you know what? In Melbourne, their rates are cheaper than what they are here. In the past 11 years living in Waraili, and I tell you what, it's a damn good town because it's got damn good people in it. But I have to say, I'm disappointed and it makes me sick when I think about council. I know you guys sit back there, you say you're fighting for us, you're fighting for us. Harry hasn't been cited, not by my eyes, and when I talk to other people, I'm sorry Harry, but a lot of people in Waraili haven't seen you since you got voted in as our representative because suddenly you became deputy mayor. Where have you been, Harry? I'm sorry, mate. I'm disappointed. You know, I'm not trying to throw you in the shed. That's not what this is about. We are desperate here in Waraili. We've got a darn good town. We've got a darn good rec reserve because we've got darn good people who are sweating every day of their lives. They're putting their own families last because they're looking after this. All right? It gets time. Waraili got on the map. We see everything happening in infrastructure, everything happening in Wangaratta. And then you say, well, go to Wangaratta to see and use what you can for your rates. Do you know what? A lot of these people in this town, they can't even get access to Wangaratta. So what do? They're paying big bucks on their rates for stuff in Wangaratta that they can't use. We need stuff here for our town, okay?
Thanks, Mary.
I really need you to start thinking about Waraili. Otherwise, I personally would love to start up a campaign to say, let's just not pay our rates, and when they haven't got our money coming in, let's see what happens. Maybe then you'll stand up and take notice of Waraili, because this is a darn good town.
Thanks, Mary, for your patience. Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your input tonight and your thoughts, and thank you for your conciliatory way in which you're talking to us. So we do appreciate you, and you do have a great community. So thanks for all being a part of it, and thanks for being here tonight and joining us, councillors. So thank you, and I'll call the meeting to an end. Thank you. Cheers.